Israël vient de fêter ses 40 ans, ça, tout le monde le sait. Ce qu'on sait peut-être un peu moins, c'est que le gouvernement israélien a nommé, il y a très peu de temps, quelques jeunes ministres. Et quand je dis jeunes, il s'agit de gens âgés de moins de 40 ans, voire de 30 ans même. Qui sont ces personnalités? Que peut-on attendre d'elles? Et comment se dessine Israël de demain avec eux? 3 ont accepté de répondre. Ils représentent à des titres variés la droite actuellement majoritaire au sein du gouvernement. Mr. Minister, you're presently Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of your country, and before you had the difficult task of representing Israel in the United Nations in New York, not talking, of course, about the book that you've written about terrorism. All are very heavy responsibilities. How can you explain such a brilliant and quick career? Are you such a lucky man?
You really have to ask a question. If a man or a woman doesn't do something in his 30s, by the time he is 30, 35, 40, then you ask yourself, what is he doing or what is she doing with the time? And I think in Israel there's so much to do. There's so many challenges that I'm glad to see that so many of my colleagues are entering and accomplishing things, and I'd like to be one of them.
On the crucial issue of the relation between Israel and the Arab states, the Israeli government seems to be, from Europe, of course, divided. Do you presently believe that present developments, I'm talking and thinking about the draft peace plan nearly being ready, can open a real and new opportunity for peace?
I think that the only kind of peace that can survive and can have meaning in the Middle East is a peace that can be defended. That is, if Israel is asked to make arrangements which will leave it indefensible, then that piece of paper, that peace treaty will not hold for 2 minutes. Peace and security are intertwined. And Israel has a security problem unlike any other country. People don't understand it. They see on television the intifada, they see the territories, they see rights. They don't understand that if we simply were to walk out, Israel becomes 10 miles wide. The Arabs tried to push us into the sea previously. They failed, but they might succeed in the future. So we have a unique problem. We want to solve the problem of the territories. We want to satisfy perhaps not all the aspirations of the Palestinian Arabs, but some of them, certainly more than they have now. At the same time, we want to live. We didn't come back here after 3,000 years in order to die again. So we have to find a way to balance these two things, and that's a unique challenge for Israel. It's not a simple one, but I have no question in my mind that we will have the way to achieve this.
Do you think the proposed election can be carried out freely in the present atmosphere?
Well, it depends if we can remove one major obstacle. Because we said, look, we are for free elections. And what does free election mean? It means we ask the Palestinian Arabs, go ahead, choose your representatives, choose freely. That means free choice. Many candidates, different views. Now, in comes the PLO, and it says, we don't want that. We'll decide who the candidates are. And if you don't like it, we shoot you. They've been killing people systematically. Yeah. They're trying to make sure that it's not an election, but a selection. They will select the people, and everybody will vote for the people they want, and if you don't like it, you die. So if we want to have free elections, what we need to do is remove the terror intimidation of Arab against Arab, of PLO against Palestinians. This is the crucial thing. If we're able to do that, and that requires obviously action on the part of Israel, security forces, but I think it also requires that the international community understand that in order to have genuinely free elections, what we have to do is reduce the power of the PLO to intimidate Palestinians.
Do you think Arabs would agree with free elections?
It's a difficult concept for them because the only place where you have free elections for Arabs in the Middle East is within Israel. Israel's Arab citizens are the only ones who enjoy free elections. So it's a novel concept. We're trying to introduce democracy, expand it. And of course, when we look around, who has had a commitment to democracy? It's only Israel. Israel's Arabs vote all the time. They just did in municipal elections. Whoever got in, got in. So we have a tradition of ballots. The PLO has tradition of bullets. And what we're trying to do, of course, is to extend our concept to that part of the Arab population that has not enjoyed democracy. I hope we succeed because it's good for the future, it's good for peace.
We have been witnessing during these last year the emergence of Muslim fundamentalism. Do you think this is a serious threat, and what can the West do to stop extremism?
There is a race in the Middle East between fanatics and moderates. It is not so much merely a race or a conflict between Israelis and Arabs, it's also between Arabs and Arabs, between Muslims and Muslims. I cannot tell you what the future will hold because it's not all of it is within our power. The forces within the Arab and Muslim world of rejecting the 20th century, rejecting the 18th century, are very powerful. They're very powerful. There's a tendency, the winds that blow from Tehran on the one hand, extreme nationalist, Arab nationalist tendencies on the other. These are very dangerous forces. They have produced states so far, like Libya, like Syria, like Iraq, like Iran, that threaten the peace of the world. They bomb planes out of the sky. They use poison gas. They torture prisoners. They abandon all norms of human conduct, standard civilized conduct. And we have a conflict in the Middle East not only between us and them, but also between those less radical Arab regimes that secretly would like to be protected from them. And I think the Western world has a vested interest, not only because of the Middle East, but also because of the implications to world peace, that such radical regimes do not gain the day. I think an important addition to that is that we don't introduce a new radical regime. We don't plant another Libya, a PLO state, right in the heart of the Middle East. This would be a prescription not for peace, but for catastrophe. And so our view is that the issue has not been settled, that all the forces of civilization and of moderation, not only in the West, but also in the Middle East itself. Arabs that I've talked to have said, whatever you do, help us against these radicals, help us against the fundamentalists. And for God's sake, Arabs have told me, Arab diplomats have told me in the UN, for God's sake, don't allow the creation of a PLO state because this will endanger us.
Do you think terrorism could stop if Israel would sign a peace treaty with his neighbors?
The terrorism is not there because of the lack of peace or the presence of peace. It is not the lack of peace that produces terrorism, but terrorism that produces the lack of peace. We've had terrorists here since the beginning of this century against Jews. We've had terrorism in the Middle East since the time of the assassins. That's about 1,000 years. So with terrorism, you don't buy them off. You don't appease the terrorist beast. You don't throw it a hunk of meat which the wolves devour and then they let you go. With terrorists, there's only one thing to do, and that is to resist them. It's like blackmail.
So
if you give
no
in a
end.
little to blackmail, you get more blackmail. You give in a little to terror, you get more terror. And this is a lesson that the Western world is slowly coming to understand, not fast enough, but slowly coming to understand. If you face up to terror, it stops. If you give into it, it increases.
But you know that because you have had such an experience, but why would we know that we in Western Europe? I mean, we were not used to terrorism before.
Western Europe is the classic place where you can learn this because in the 70s and also in the early 80s, some of the Western European countries made separate deals with terrorists. They said, it's okay, you can, as long as you don't attack our own nationals, you can operate from our soil. And what the terrorists did in a number of Western European countries is use Europe as a playing field for terrorists. They not only killed each other, they bombed and blew planes out of the sky and so on. They have no respect and great contempt for those countries that refuse to take a stand against them. And eventually these countries become the victim of increased terror. So the battle against terrorism is indivisible. It's indivisible. Terrorism is bad everywhere. There are no good terrorists and bad terrorists. You have to fight them everywhere, including in your own soil.
You've met in the course of your career some of the most influential people in modern policy. Who impressed you the most?
with a number of people in Europe and, of course, the United States with George Shultz and Henry Kissinger and Jean Kirkpatrick. But these are just a few of the names. There are many fine people that I've met, and a lot of people that I've met who weren't necessarily in a position of prominence. They weren't famous. They worked behind the scenes, but sometimes they had just as much influence, and often more influence than the people with the shining neon lights. I think what is required is intelligence and drive and commitment, and it doesn't make any difference if you're before the cameras or behind the cameras, because really those qualities are what count.
What do you consider to be the most rewarding moment in your official career? And conversely, what is your worst memory?
Well, I'd say that the worst memory was, frankly, a decision taken by my government, which I opposed as an ambassador, and I expressed that. It's not normally done. You know that a diplomat has to follow the government's decision, but on this one I had to speak out, and I did, knowing fully well that if they wanted to, I would readily submit my resignation. This was when my government decided on a special case to release 1,100 terrorists in order to save the lives of, to get the release of 3 Israeli prisoners. I thought then, as I think now, that this was a tragic mistake, and I spoke out against it. It was, I thought, something that went against the whole grain of our policy and our effort and our struggle. Perhaps the most rewarding moment that I remember was paradoxically in the UN. And in the UN, we waged for about 1.5 years a long struggle to open up secret Nazi archives that were, so to speak, in the basement of the UN for 40 years, locked, kept away from the public and from law enforcement people. And after 1.5 years of an effort against basically everyone, we managed to open up, and I felt very much the day that we walked in there that we had done something of importance for posterity.
Without entering too long a debate, what are your main hopes for tomorrow's Israel?
Well, first of all, to make the country secure. This is a unique experiment. No people has come back from the dead twice, and we have defied the laws of history. We are a people that suffered so many blows that, according to all common conceptions, we shouldn't be here anymore. We are here because there's a tremendous life force, but I think it's very clear to everyone that history is not going to give the Jewish people another chance. This return, this rebirth is our chance. And so we have to first fortify and protect the state for the future. And I think that that is something that I share with all my colleagues, regardless of political views. Second thing, I would like to have this a better country to live in. We've done a great many things, great many successes in our 40-odd years, but we need to now open up our markets. I mean, our economic markets, our political markets, our communication markets, to have people exercise choice, free choice, and competition. We believe it. The whole world sees that it works, and we need perestroika in Israel too. That's the second thing.
Oh, you Gorbachev.
Yes. And the third thing, I think, is the possibility of having a large ingathering of Jews here, especially from the Soviet Union. I think there is imminent a change in Soviet immigration policies that would allow hundreds of thousands of Jews potentially to come to Israel. We need those Jews, as we need Jews from Arab lands, who with the right kind of action and pressure I think we can get here. We need to bring those people to Zion, use their skills, use their backgrounds, use their talents to build a future for us as the Jewish people, as the heart of the Jewish people. That's what Israel is.
What are your personal ambitions?
To be part of this process. I wouldn't be in politics if I didn't want that. I'm in politics in order to serve a purpose,
Yes.
not in order to be served.
Monsieur le ministre, vous avez été nommé en novembre dernier ministre de l'Intérieur et vous n'avez que 29 ans. Comment peut-on devenir le plus jeune ministre d'un gouvernement, vu bien sûr du point de vue européen?
האמת שאני לא מרגיש כל הזמן השר הכי צעיר. אני, רק לאחר שהתמניתי, נודע לי שאני השר הכי צעיר. אני כבר נמצא כמה שנים בפוליטיקה, התחלתי כבר בגיל 25, כך שלא חשבתי באמת על השאלה הזאת. כשאני אצא לפנסיה, אני אחשוב באמת על התשובה.
Est-ce que votre jeune âge n'est pas parfois un handicap pour vous? Problème de crédibilité, par exemple?
אני לא חושב, האחריות המשותפת בין שרי הממשלה, אין אחריות יותר למי בגיל 70 או למי שבגיל 30, האחריות היא שווה, כך שאני לא רואה את הנטל. אני גם אמרתי כבר, מכיר את השרים האלה כבר כמה שנים, כך שאנחנו, ההפרשי הגיל אולי לא, אני לא מרגיש את הבעיה.
Comment pouvez-vous concilier vos convictions religieuses et votre pratique religieuse avec une Israël que je suppose vous voudriez ouverte au monde?
אין שום סתירה שבדבר הזה. אפשר לחיות במדינה לפי המורשת שלה ולפי התרבות ולפי המצוות, וגם להיות פתוח כלפי העולם. אני חושב שהעולם מכבד כל עם שחי על פי אמונתו.
Que pensez-vous de la génération actuelle et de la jeunesse juive? Arabes et juifs, à votre avis, sont-ils capables de vivre ensemble, comme ça a été le cas il y a des années?
ערבים ויהודים יכולים לחיות ביחד, אין על זה שום ספק. עובדה, אני באתי מארץ כמו מרוקו, שחיינו ביחד יהודים וערבים. אין שום סתירה שבדבר. לצערנו, בישראל, בגלל המצב של המלחמה, נוצר איזשהו נתק, אבל אני משוכנע, ברגע שהנושא של השלום ייגמר והתהליך השלום יתפוס, לא תהיה שום בעיה לחיות ביחד. ההפך, אני חושב שמבחינת מנטליות יש הרבה בין התרבות שלנו לתרבות שלהם. לגבי הנוער היהודי, אני חושב שהוא נוער נפלא. רק צריך לחזק יותר את הזהות שלו, וצריך שהנוער הזה ירגיש גאווה שהוא נוער יהודי, וגם שהוא ירגיש גאווה שהוא שייך לעם היהודי. אני חושב שגם זה יתוקן, יהיה יותר זהות ברגע שהנושא של התהליך של השלום ייגמר, יהיה יותר גאווה לנוער היהודי ברחבי העולם להגיד, אני יהודי, ולהתגאות בזה.
Vous êtes un jeune ministre. Est-ce que vous avez le sentiment que la jeunesse israélienne, toute appartenance religieuse mise à part, croit en vous?
א', אני אמרתי שוב, למשל, אצלי במפלגה שלי אני כבר נחשב בין זקנים של המפלגה. יש כבר דור צעיר שמבקש, אני לא מרגיש כל כך, אמרתי את הנושא הזה של צעיר. אני חושב שהדור הצעיר, לא יודע אם הוא מאמין בי או לא מאמין בי, אבל מאוד שמח ומאוד מרגיש יותר קשר עם שרים צעירים יותר, כיוון שהוא מרגיש שאנחנו מדברים בשפה שלו, אנחנו מבינים את בעיותיו, אולי יותר קצת משרים שיותר מבוגרים, שקשה להם אולי להזדהות יותר עם הנוער. אני מרגיש שהשרים הצעירים בממשלה, ויש לנו כמה כאלה בממשלה, כשנפגשים עם הנוער, אני מרגיש יותר אהדה אולי, בגלל שאנחנו מדברים בשפה שלהם ובבעיות שלהם, אנחנו מבינים יותר טוב מאחרים אולי.
Quelles sont vos ambitions politiques?
אין לי, האמביציות שלי זה לא להרבה זמן. אני לא חושב להגיע יותר רחוק, או הרבה יותר רחוק מה שהיום, כיוון שאני הגעתי למסקנה שבשביל להתקדם הלאה ולהגיע לתפקידים יותר בכירים, אתה צריך לקבל החלטה שאתה מקדיש את כל חייך לפוליטיקה. ואני לא נמצא, אני לא מוכן בשום אופן להקדיש את חיי, כיוון שיש לי משפחה ואני רוצה לעשות גם דברים אחרים. כך שאם מראש אני יודע שאני לא מוכן להקדיש הרבה שנים, אז מראש אין לי הרבה אמביציות. אני רוצה עוד כמה שנים להיות שר, לתרום בענייני פנים וחברה, לאחר מכן לפנות את הדרך לאחרים, יותר צעירים ממני.
À quoi aimeriez-vous consacrer votre vie, si ce n'est après la politique?
זה אני חושב שנגזר עליי, שכל ימי חיי אני צריך, זה טבוע בי הנושא של עסקנות למען הציבור, אבל הפוליטיקה זה דבר שמצריך את כולך.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur le ministre.
Merci beaucoup, très bien.
Mr. Minister, you were appointed last December Minister for Environment, and everybody knows you as being the Prime Minister's right arm. These are very heavy responsibility for such a young man. How do you manage to reconcile them?
I think that these are two different questions. The first one about the ministry. I believe it's a very important ministry, the Ministry of the Environment. It's a new one in Israel. We didn't have a Ministry of the Environment for the environment till this government. This is the first one that we have. And it's mainly because we came to the conclusion that this issue that years ago was not so important in Israel, now it became more important because people are more aware of the environmental problems. We have more problems than before. We have water problem, water pollution, air pollution. We have problems with our seashores. We have problems with the ozone, which, I mean, we are part of the world about this problem, of course. Problems of nature and keeping the nature as good as we can. And issues like this, which we consider to be now more important for the future than many other issues that we had before. I think that maybe it's also a sign for normalization about the state of Israel. Many years we were only worried about security, defense, economy. And now we start to worry about environment, which means about the future.
You didn't tell me about reconciliation of the two things, being the right arm of the Prime Minister and being the Minister of Environment. These two things.
I don't think that there is a direct contact between the two.
How can you share yourself in two pieces to be both?
Because, first of all, you are in Israel a minister in the government. The government is the most important, I think, political body that we have in Israel, in which we take the important decisions about security, about peace, about foreign relations, about economy, and about environmental issues, health issues, other issues that we have to deal with. I think that there is no contradiction between being a minister responsible for a portfolio like Ministry of the Environment, and at the same time to be in very good relations with the Prime Minister.
Do you face any obstacles in your undertakings?
Now it's related to your other question about the relations with the Prime Minister. If you want to build a new ministry, you must have very strong backing from the Prime Minister, because what's the meaning of building a new ministry? You have to take departments from other ministries that till now didn't pay too much attention to these departments mainly concerning the environmental issues, and to transfer these departments from one ministry to my ministry. And as you know, ministers in the government, they doesn't like to give up anything, neither the chair nor departments.
And your youth doesn't help you in that case?
I don't know, it doesn't help, it doesn't hurt, but yes. It's not very easy.
No.
And therefore I have a long fight already in the government. I succeeded already to get most of the departments that I need. I have some other departments that I'm still working on for, and I have very good chance, I think, to succeed, and we shall have, hopefully, strong and productive Ministry of Environment because we need it.
Considering the criticism often addressed to aging political elite in Israel, do you believe that your youth opens a new chance for your country?
I think that we are now in a very interesting political process in Israel, in which the young generation are getting more and more involved in politics. Years ago, the young generation really was not too strongly interested and involved in the Israeli politics. They thought that politics is for somebody else. Now you see more and more young people that came to the conclusion that in politics you still have to take the most important decision for the country, whether it's concerning peace, security, economy, everything. And therefore, more young people are getting involved, and in our government now, it's the first time that we have 4 young ministers around the 40s. In Israel, 40 is a very young age for politicians.
Even 30 years old, Mr. Deri is only 30 years old.
Yes, that's right. But he's not belong to my party, therefore I forgot him. But still, he's very young, he is 30, and around 30, and we have 4 ministers in our party which are around 40s. Most of them are, all of them are very efficient and talented young ministers in the government with great future. And I think that it's a very important symbol for the future of Israeli politics.
What financial assistance would you expect from the Jewish community abroad?
Basically the support for Israel and the support that they give for the Israel foreign policy and our foreign I would say efforts that we are making in other countries for improving our PR and status there. This is the most important contribution that they can give us, because about the most important issues we have to deal here in Israel. We are taking the responsibility, of course, for the security here. We are taking responsibilities for environmental problems, health problems, education, and other problems. The Jewish community abroad can help us when it comes to our effort to improve our status, our support in other countries around the world, and sometimes also about our economy, because foreign investments in Israel, for us it's very important. Hospitals and also industry. When it comes to advanced science industry, there are Jews abroad that invest in Israel, and they have a very profitable factories here and business, but still it's important for us to have the basic capital to build these industries.
You are a young minister. Do you feel that young Israelis are receptive to you?
It's very hard to say, because it's hard to be objective about yourself. But I feel that the Israelis and the young Israelis especially, they are very happy about the fact that we have young people in the government, that we have people that they can identify themselves with them, and they feel that they are real partners for the future of the country. And therefore I feel I can feel the quite a good I would say reflection from the young people that I meet.
Thank you, Mills. Nous sommes ici devant le bâtiment de la Knesset qui, comme on le sait, est le siège du Parlement israélien. C'est ici que bat en quelque sorte le pouls de la nation israélienne, ici que sont prises les grandes décisions politiques du pays.